So far, all the work we've been doing has been getting information from the user, processing it, giving some feedback. Useful, but one of the things we want to work with are large and larger data sets. It's one of the reasons Python is a popular programming language at the moment. And there are two ways to get these. One is straight from a database, and the other most popular method is from a text file. And we're going to be reading from text files and writing to text files. Um, and when we work with text files, there are two things we need to worry about. One is direct addressing and one is relative addressing. Relative addressing is you just give the file name and just a file name, and it will look in the folder that the py file is in to try and find that file in most instances. And we're doing direct addressing. You want the entire file name or the long file name. So that would be the drive slash and the whole thing. So if we look at some of the sample files we have, I have file reader underscore Drowse here. You can see we have file name equal, and then I have c/user/drowse/desktop/spring underscore 2020b/week6/chapter10/pydigits.txt. This is just the pydigits.txt is the file name, but the long file name or direct file name, direct addressing is that entire string. In Python, the slashes go this way. In Windows, the slashes go the other way. So if you copy the directory structure from Windows, you're going to have to change your slashes to the other direction. So keep that in mind if you can't find the file. I would recommend doing it this way just because your life will be easier, but depending on what kind of production environment you're in, you're probably going to be just using relative addressing, which is just a file name. Use your U drive because it won't work well if you don't have your U drive in there. Because then you can move from place to place to place, and it's always in the same place because it's always on your U drive, which is why the U drive is so useful. So anyhow, let's look at file reader underscore Drowse. As you can see, we set a file name, we set a variable called file name equal to the location of the file. It doesn't have to be the variable name file name, it just makes sense to be file name. Then we're going to use the with command and the open command to open the file name. Now we're going to use with because if you use with, all the commands that deal with the file are inside the with statement, so they're easy to keep track of. And with the with, as soon as you're done with the with, then it automatically closes the file, which makes the operating system happy and the risk of screwing up your file a whole lot smaller. So I would strongly suggest you always use the with. Now you don't have to use the with. The command works without the with, but I would strongly suggest you use the with. So you use the with, you use the open, and then the file name in here. We put the file name as a variable, and if you don't want to use a variable, you could put this whole thing in there as well. You could copy and paste that in, and it would work. And then we do a file as a name, and this is the name of an object we're going to be able to use to access the contents of the file. Again, this can be anything you want. I'm calling it file object because the book called it file object. And then we set the variable contents equal to the file object with the read method. So it's file object.read. Again, whatever you have up here is what you have to do, file object.read here. And it just reads the entire contents of the file into a single variable. You can have a huge file, and it just reads it all into a single variable. Really, really cool. And then we print out the results. And if you hit play, that's what you get. And the PyDigits is the PyDigits. Now, if we want to look at that file, we can go to something like, there's the PyDigits, and if we right-click on it and edit with Notepad++, you can see it's just a text file. We can always create these on our own. Just go to Notebook++ and type in your file and then save as .txt, and you're creating a text file. But let's get back to Python. If we go to File Reader 2, you can see we're reading a little bit different. Now we set the file name up, we open the file, but now instead of reading it all into a single variable, we're we're cycling through that file object, reading line by line by line, and printing it out the results. So as you can see, we get the same thing, but now we're printing line by line by line. And remember, the file, it was all over 3 different lines, which is why it's showing up that way. There's no line breaks or anything. That's just how the file was written. And as you can see, it shows up really nice. If we look at file reader 3, we read it a third way. We set up the file, we set up the file object. Now we set lines equal to file object, but instead of read, we set it up as read lines. And what this does is it sets the line variable to a list. And once we have it as a list, we can read through it line by line by line. But there's a lot of other things we can do to it. So reading it in as a list can make your life a whole lot easier in many ways. And of course, if we run that, we can see that it runs that. If you look at PyString, we're going to read lines, again, make a list, and then for line in lines, we're going to take that 3 lines of code and we're going to make it one long string of digits. And we're using the plus equal sign object operator here because this file started out from the textbooks, and that's what they use in the textbook. And basically, it's the same as saying PyString is equal to PyString plus line.rstrip. And again, rstrip is just taking out the extra spaces at the end of the from the text file. I don't know whether plus equal is better than equals variable plus new variable. It is easier to read that way, and Python's supposed to be written as easier to read, but you might see this as well, so I left it in there for you to see. We then ask for a birthday, and then we say, is the birthday in that string? And if it is in the string, then it says your birthday is in the first 1,000,000 digits of pi, and if not, it says does not in the first 1,000,000 digits of pi. So this file that we're reading is the first 1,000,000 digits of pi. So if we run this and we put a date in, let's say, oh, I don't know, 12/01/55, we get, hey, I'm in the first digit, 1,000,000 digits of pi. So you can try it out and see if you're in the first 1,000,000 digits of pi or not. And that's really how you do reads in reading text files in Python. Quick, easy. It's really easy to read in text files. And we'll move on to writing text files next.